Hello to VISCOH. I welcome you to our segment, Your Parquet Deserves the Best Underlayment. When investing in a new parquet flooring today, it's usually a well-considered decision. However, the significant influence of the underlayment on the comfort and durability of the floor is often underestimated. An underlayment has various tasks to fulfill, and floating installed hardwood floor is only as good as its underlayment. Today, I'll show you what matters in an underlayment, what distinguishes our two underlays, VISCOH 1 and VISCOH Air, compared to others, and why they are excellent choices for hardwood flooring. In 2022, the European Federation of Parquet Manufacturers, abbreviated as FEP, released a guideline for underlayments for the floating installation of multi-layer parquet. This document sets minimum requirements as well as higher requirements. Minimum requirements are essential for any underlayment. There are indeed numerous underlayments on the market that do not meet these requirements. And then, the initial joy of a new floor can quickly turn into frustration. Higher requirements should be applied when dealing with rooms of heavier usage or when one's standards for the floor, such as in terms of durability or acoustics, are higher. What are these requirements? Well, the underlayment primarily needs to ensure the floating installation of the parquet, protect it, and enhance comfort. And that's specified in this guideline. It is divided into the following categories. A. The underlayment must meet the constructive requirements. These are called the structural requirements. And B. It must ensure the protection of the parquet floor. This is defined in the usage requirements. However, there is another important point, and that is the acoustics, which, although not regulated in the guideline, are an important aspect because your customer will always judge the quality of the underlayment, and thus also of their floor, primarily based on how loud or quiet they perceive it. Firstly, is there underfloor heating, or does the underlayment need to provide insulation? Therefore, the thermal resistance of the underlayment is crucial. If there is underfloor heating, then the thermal resistance of the entire floor construction, including the underlayment and the parquet, should not exceed an R value of 0.15 square meters Kelvin per watt. Both our VISCOH 1 with an R value of 0.044 and VISCOH Air with 0.05 are suitable for underfloor heating systems for parquet thicknesses up to 15 millimeters. The second point is the punctual conformability of an underlay, the so-called PC value. It defines how much punctual unevenness an underlay can level out. The minimum requirement is 0.5 millimeters. Our underlays achieve 0.8 millimeters for the 1 and 1.2 millimeters for the Air. The third point of the structural requirements is moisture protection. Because with mineral substrates, such as concrete, a certain residual moisture is always to be expected, even with older screeds, which can lead to damage to the floor. Therefore, a general principle applies. Moisture protection with an SD value of at least 75 meters should always be used on mineral substrates. For example, in the form of a PE film, or the underlayment already has moisture protection integrated, such as our two underlayments 1 and Air in the Plus version. Here you can see the testing device. For this, a granulate that absorbs moisture is placed in a dish. Then the test specimen is placed on top and the edges are sealed with wax. After some time, the amount of moisture that has penetrated into the dish is determined. And from this, the SD value is calculated. By the way, for non-mineral substrates, such as OSB boards, underlayments with moisture protection should not be used, so that the construction can breathe. While not an EFP requirement, another important aspect is water absorption. An underlayment should not retain too much moisture, as this can create a breeding ground for mold. During testing, samples are immersed in water baths, and their weight is measured after a certain period. The homogeneous closed-cell structure of our underlayments has a significant advantage here. Therefore, water absorption is less than 1% after 24 hours. In contrast, other underlayments such as PU heavy mats with mineral sand filling have an open cell structure and absorb up to 25% moisture in the same time period. For example, 25 times as much. Let's move on to the second main point of requirements, which serve to protect the parquet floor, known as the usage requirements. This defines the pressure stability of an underlay with regard to short-term, permanent, and dynamic loads. An underlay that does not meet the minimum requirements here can lead to damage to the parquet, or that the initial acoustic insulation properties are later no longer achieved. In this category, we differentiate between 2 static and 1 dynamic loads. Let's start with dynamic loads. This test simulates the daily foot traffic on the floor. Here, repeated short-term pressure is applied to the underlay with the aim of achieving as many repetitions, also called cycles, as possible, without experiencing a defined loss in thickness. The minimum requirement is 10,000 cycles, while the enhanced requirement is 100,000. The higher the DL value, the longer the underlay will withstand these dynamic loads. This test often exposes inferior underlays, such as PE lightweight foams. For example, VISCOH Air exceeds 1 million cycles in this test, and it probably achieves much more, but we couldn't test it because after 1 million cycles, the test stopped. Now, let's move on to the 2 static load tests, CS and CC. CS stands for Compressive Strength and measures short-term loads, such as sitting on a chair, while the CC value, Compressive Creep, reflects long-term loads. The minimum requirement for the CS value is 10 kilopascals. This corresponds to around 1 ton. If the underlay yields too much here, i.e. more than 0.5 millimeters, the test would not be passed. For higher requirements, the CS value must be at least 60 kilopascals, which means around 6 tons. The CC value simulates the condition of the underlay after 10 years if, for example, a heavy piece of furniture has been placed on it. The minimum requirement here is 2 kilopascals. For higher requirements, this value must be at least 20 kilopascals. Although not an explicit FEP requirement, the resilience of an underlay, also known as compression set, is of crucial importance. We once tried to illustrate this at a trade fair by driving a car over 2 underlays to see what happens when an underlay is subjected to extreme loads. While the VISCOH 1 recovers completely, the XPS underlay remains permanently deformed, even though it has a higher nominal compressive load, i.e. a higher CS or CC value. This recovery effect with the VISCOH 1 is due to the high viscoelasticity, but I'll come to that in a moment. These are the 2 samples that we drove over at the trade fair. And what we wanted to illustrate with this is that once the cell structure of an underlay is damaged, it no longer has the properties that it should actually retain over the years and can therefore no longer do the work that it should. And this applies not only to the usage requirements, i.e. the protection of the floor, but also to the acoustic requirements, which I will now explain to you. In acoustics, we distinguish between impact sound and walking sound. Impact sound, represented by the IS value, refers to the sound transmitted to underlying and adjacent rooms. Walking sound or room sound is the sound that is so perceived in the room itself, the so-called RWS value. RWS stands for Radiated Walking Sound. What many people don't realize is that these 2 sound events compete with each other. Impact sound requires decoupling from the subfloor, which means a large suspension. On the other hand, reducing walking sound requires stabilizing the floor to prevent it from vibrating too much. A large suspension is counterproductive in this case. Until now, customers had to choose between one or the other, because effectively minimizing both sound events requires 2 central properties, suspension and damping, essentially similar to a car shock absorber. And this is where the strengths of our underlays truly shine. VISCOH stands for viscoelasticity, a term derived from viscosity and elasticity. By combining both components in one material, we effectively reduce both sound events, both walking and impact noise. The viscous component optimally fills voids, keeping the floor quiet and damping walking noise, while the elastic component decouples and reduces impact noise. Impact sound reduction is measured in decibels. To measure it, a standard tapping machine is placed on a flooring with the underlay to be tested beneath it, and sound is generated. The sound pressure is measured in the room below both, with and without the underlaying being tested. The difference between the 2 values is ultimately the impact sound reduction value. Interestingly, the human ear perceives a difference of 6 decibels as a halving or doubling of the sound. The walking sound is given as a percentage and indicates by how much the loudness is reduced compared to a standard PE underlay, as we saw in the picture earlier. To generate the sound, an impact hammer is used. Our walking sound tests are conducted according to EPLF draft standard 021029-5. Therefore, when comparing values of other underlays with ours, ensure that they have been tested using the same measurement method, as there are other measurement procedures, such as the IHD factory standard, which tend to yield higher values. Ultimately, both the performance data for impact sound reduction and walking sound improvement follow the principle that the higher these values are, the better the sound insulation properties of an underlay. VISCOH Air achieves peak values in both categories, with 30% improvement in walking sound and 20 decibel impact sound reduction. And that is unique. There are underlays on the market that achieve either one or the other, but not both. And that's what makes our underlays special. They excel in all aspects, as illustrated by this radar chart. Each corner represents one of the described requirements: impact sound, walking sound, PC value, SD value, and so on. The perimeter of the radar chart indicates the maximum achievable value, so the further out the area is on the diagram, the better the product performs in that category. The red line represents the minimum requirements, while the blue line represents the elevated requirements. Now, let's take a look at the data for our Air Plus, and you can see that it achieves an excellent overall performance and has top scores in almost all areas. What sets VISCOH underlays apart from all other materials is one technology: cross-linking. The elaborate manufacturing process consists of 3 stages. The first stage is extrusion, where the raw material is shaped under pressure, heat, and the addition of additives. The second stage is cross-linking, where the long molecular chains are broken at certain points and then bond with other chains, forming a network. It's a highly intricate process, but it creates a more stable connection and increases elasticity and stretchability. Ultimately, the cross-linking process is what distinguishes us from others. It's the key to the viscoelastic and durable properties of our underlays, and the reason why we can offer up to 30 years of warranty. In the third production step, the foam is expanded, making it smooth and elastic. By the way, all of this is done with safe and low-emission ingredients. And now, let's dive into the key performance data of our 2 installation underlays, VISCOH 1 and VISCOH Air. VISCOH 1 comes in 2 versions, 1 without moisture protection and 1 Plus with moisture protection. Both are high-quality underlays and serve as an entry into the premium class. They offer good sound insulation properties with up to 19 or 20 dB impact sound reduction and 10% reduction in walking sound. They meet all minimum requirements for the FEP and are suitable for underfloor heating. They are approved by building authorities and also carry the Blue Angel Eco label. We provide a 10-year warranty for both. VISCOH Air is our high-performance underlay. It is also available in 2 versions, with and without moisture protection, and sets standards with 20 dB impact sound reduction and 30% improvement in walking sound. It meets all enhanced FEP requirements, has extremely high resilience, and is suitable for underfloor heating. Like 1, it is approved by building authorities, carries the Blue Angel Eco label, and comes with a 30-year warranty. You will receive the complete performance data of our products summarized separately in an attachment. Finally, here's a comparison of our products with common commercial underlays. For comparison, we have non-crosslink PE light foams and cork rolls, and the typical DIY store products made of XPS and the PU heavy mats. The disadvantages of non-cross-linked PE foams and cork rolls are lower stability and thus a shorter lifespan. They do not meet all FEP requirements, and they have a lower walking sound improvement and worse impact sound reduction compared to our foams. The disadvantages of XPS, which stands for extruded polystyrene, are a shorter lifespan due to poor recovery capability and lower walking sound improvement. The disadvantages of PU mats with mineral fillings, also known as heavy mats, are that they can become a breeding ground for mold due to their high water absorption and have poorer impact sound insulation due to lower elasticity. In summary, there are many reasons why high-quality underlays should be used with premium parquet flooring. VISCOH underlays are excellent for parquet because they firstly set standards in sound insulation, secondly, retain their properties over decades, and thirdly, make a significant contribution to indoor health. So in conclusion, parquet underlays must meet the state-of-the-art and the requirements of the FEP. There are minimum requirements for lightly to normally used rooms and higher requirements for normally to heavily frequented rooms. VISCOH 1 meets all minimum requirements. VISCOH Air meets all higher requirements and sets benchmarks in both impact and walking sound insulation. The unique feature of VISCOH underlays is their physical networking and the associated VISCOH elasticity. That's all for today. I hope it was informative. Thank you so much for watching and visit us on our website at www.viscoh.de.